Sukuna has only ever respected 10 sorcerers over 1,000 years, and every single one of them had to meet his criteria. Some matched his power, some broke the rules of Jujutsu, and some abandoned their humanity. But in JJK Modulo the sequel, Sukuna would finally have to acknowledge someone who surpassed him in every way. His name is Yuji Itadori. The king would call him a brat countless times, someone who didn't have a single interesting bone in his body. Yet by chapter 248, Sukuna wasn't bored anymore. He was irritated, and to understand why Yuji changed his life, we have to rewind 1,000 years back to the Heian era. Sukuna admits he has never changed since then. He ate when he wanted, killed anything that annoyed him, and threw a scrap of bones to whoever entertained him. Every sorcerer who challenged him believed they were martyrs to their ideals, but Sukuna never understood them, because in his eyes, if you failed to measure up to his existence, the blame was yours alone. That's why he single-handedly slaughtered entire armies, the Sun, Moon, Star Squads, the 5 empty generals, and decimated the Fujiwara clan. Sukuna crushed them so completely that the authorities of Japan were holding festivals in his honor. However, this led to a huge problem. Sukuna was bored, and that's where Kenjaku comes in. He earned the king's respect by solving it. His entire goal was entertainment with the creature that will be born from the culling game. But Kenjaku stated he has 2 requirements to become friends with someone. Number 1, you can't be boring, and number 2, you must be treated as equals. As a result, Gojo speculates Kenjaku and Sukuna created a binding vow in exchange to teach incarnation. After all, Kenjaku's knowledge was immense. He predates the Nara period before the king was born. He knew Tengen as a friend and incarnated drug from 2,000 years ago. Kenjaku then used incarnation in front of Sukuna to show him immortality. Angel then claimed every other incarnated sorcerer thought it was impossible and couldn't replicate it. They got jealous of Sukuna because his understanding of Jujutsu was so advanced, he only saw it once to copy it. As a result, Sukuna split his soul into 20 indestructible fingers, but after death, his remains were kept by Uraume. Sukuna found Uraume in the Heian era. She stood alone among frozen corpses. They couldn't turn their curse technique off, which meant anyone who came close died instantly, including their own parents. So like Sukuna, Uraume was cursed from birth, but at first, he kept Uraume for convenience as their ice technique preserved food. However, that relationship evolved. Uraume learned to cook, specializing in humans that Sukuna enjoyed the most. And with Kenjaku's help, Uraume followed Sukuna all the way into the modern era right up to his death. Uraume orchestrated massacres in the king's name, prepared Megami's bath, and ensured his revival during Shibuya. But chapter 271 confirms not their respect for each other, but love. Only after meeting Yuji did Sukuna finally understand what love could have been and why he rejected it. He admits there was once 2 paths he could have taken, but choosing that path meant rejecting the curse inside him, vomiting it out, and letting go of the hatred he wrapped around himself at birth. However, Sukuna was afraid of that, because if he stopped being a curse, then his entire existence would lose its meaning. In the end, Sukuna accepts Uraume as a companion to reincarnate with. However, who was the second woman in the path that Sukuna mentioned? Well, the answer is Yorozu. Like Sukuna, Yorozu acted only to satisfy herself. As a result, the Heian capital referred to her as a hick. She had no regard whatsoever for formalities and liked eating humans just like Sukuna. But their similarities go even deeper. Yorozu was acknowledged as one of the strongest by the Fujiwara clan. As a result, when Yorozu first met the king, her immediate desire was to lift his loneliness with love, as she understood the solitude that comes with strength. However, in the afterlife, Sukuna admits he refused any love out of spite. Yorozu didn't die in the flashback after Sukuna's slash. After all, she had to survive to eventually make the contract with Kenjaku to incarnate for the culling game. She would end up chasing Sukuna, but ends up only being a choice he never took. However, another strong sorcerer who earned Sukuna's respect is Kashimo. He held the title of strongest 400 years ago. No one was able to force Kashimo to use his one-time use technique, so he suffered the same problem of boredom and solitude Sukuna had. The king was forced to take his original form, but then he locked in to answer his questions. Kashimo wanted answers. Is it possible to feel love for others who are weak and beneath your existence? And is the curse of strength to wander endlessly in the path of loneliness? However, Sukuna calls this greedy. They are admired because they are strong, and when someone challenges them, the only respect they can show is to give everything in return. Sukuna's respect for Kashimo was simple. He crushed him the same way Kashimo had crushed everyone else, and by doing that, Sukuna forced him into the position of being weak, and only Sukuna could do that. Now Kashimo understood both sides of strength, and as a result, he said love is worthless. Kashimo never should have searched for fulfillment in others. He should have lived exactly as he pleased. And that's where Jogo comes in, who earned Sukuna's respect. He said, "Stand proud, you're strong." But why? Well, this fight shows exactly what Sukuna meant to Kashimo. At first, Sukuna treats Jogo like a weakling and wants to see if he's entertaining. So when he does maximum meteor, Sukuna responds with his own firepower to have fun and then teaches a lesson. He could tell Jogo had potential, but after being humbled by Gojo in his domain, Jogo developed an inferiority complex. He was too afraid to use domain expansion again, but Sukuna states he should have burnt everything away to reach the peak that is Gojo. The need to flock together is a weakness that stunts growth, which Jogo ends up agreeing with. And speaking of immense growth, we now have Higuruma, who made Sukuna literally put respect on his name. Within 12 days of gaining curse energy, Higuruma was already fighting at a grade 1 level, and from there his genius talent just kept growing. He figured out Jujutsu so deeply that he unlocked domain expansion by reverse engineering how barriers work from scratch. Sukuna pled guilty instantly because he was so fascinated with his executioner sword. That alone also caught Kenjaku's attention, by the way, who admitted that Higuruma was the only player he actually cared about. But then the respect kept increasing. By simply watching Gojo fight Sukuna, Higuruma learned domain amplification, a technique so advanced that veteran sorcerers relied on weaker substitutes like simple domain or falling blossom emotion. But Higuruma upgraded it by learning how to pause it mid-fight, so his technique wouldn't disappear. That's when Sukuna acknowledges that Higuruma was wielding his technique almost as efficiently as he was. Sukuna then forced him to learn reverse curse technique on the spot. Because of all of these power-ups happening in less than 2 months as a sorcerer, in the end he only failed because of inexperience. In fact, Sukuna respected him so much that in chapter 248 he reflects on Higuruma's death and feels disappointed that he had to kill him so soon. But you know who didn't disappoint Sukuna? Satoru freaking Gojo. From the very start, Gojo was treated like a problem. Sukuna was surprised that Gojo wasn't in charge of Jujutsu Society. To him, any system not ruled by strength was stupid. And from their brief encounter at the start of the series, Sukuna already detected that Gojo was the strongest of this era. That's why he makes it very clear. The moment he takes control of Yuji's body, Gojo is the first person he plans to kill, because Gojo was the only one worthy of that attention. Then, for 14 chapters straight. Gojo pushed Sukuna harder than anyone ever had. Domain clashes, curse technique burnout, reverse curse technique spam, and both of them were basically breaking the rules of Jujutsu in real time, achieving the impossible. The fight got so intense it scarred the earth, and that damage still hasn't healed 68 years later in Modulo. So this wasn't Sukuna playing with his food, this was Sukuna locked in. Gojo forced the king to evolve and calculate everything with Mahoraga, and that's a level of respect no one has ever received, because Sukuna even learned from him on how to heal a burnout technique with the brain. He then used the 10 shadows to steal the blueprint for the world cutting slash, and even after killing him, Sukuna says he'll never forget about Gojo as long as he lived. He cleared his skies. He was the only one who made Sukuna feel that the throne was challenged, as he felt fear for the first time. But then comes Maki Zeni. Sukuna's fascination with Maki is the fact that her strength forced him into a role he's never had before. Sukuna has slaughtered countless powerful sorcerers across history, but all of them followed the same path of Jujutsu. But Maki abandoned the fundamentals entirely and reached the top through pure physical strength alone with the body. That contradiction is what caught Sukuna's attention. Maki's existence challenged his long-held belief that absolute power can only be achieved through sorcery. So for the first time, Sukuna was forced into a role. He was fighting to prove something. Maki tanking attacks that would erase normal sorcerers, damaging him with the soul-splitting katana, and even dodging the world-cutting slash. It made Sukuna admit that she couldn't be killed carelessly and compared fighting her to facing Mahoraga, a threat that demands constant adaptation. Which leads me to explain Daddy Raga. No, I'm not talking about the bum Megami. He only respected the Raga because of his ability. He's the only character besides Gojo and Yuji that Sukuna admitted had the potential to kill him. Mahoraga basically represents Sukuna's greatest fear and his greatest value at the same time. A world where strength alone isn't enough unless you keep evolving. It forced him to adapt and has unlimited ceiling of strength. Sukuna enjoyed fighting Daddy Raga just below Gojo and used him in a strategy to win. He complimented Mahoraga for adapting to Limitless and providing the model for the world cutting slash. On the other hand, Todo earned Sukuna's respect for a reason that has nothing to do with power. Todo turned the raid against Sukuna into a nightmare. The king says it was the worst possible timing for multiple reasons. Firstly, Boogie Woogie is impossible to predict. He straight up praises it, claiming Todo is a true sorcerer to his core. But that begs the question, why Todo and not the others? Well, that's because Todo has always been built different. Everyone openly hates him, and even in Modulo the sequel, at 85 years old, that hatred never faded. Because this is the same guy who claims he has a IQ of 230,000. He refused to assassinate Yuji and threatened to kill his own classmates if they got in his way. He almost murdered Megami over a question about girls that only made sense to him. Todo doesn't care about rules, and just like Sukuna, his loyalty begins and ends with himself. That's why he showed up to Shibuya on his own and complained about missions that made him miss his favorite idol show. Todo is basically the embodiment of confidence, and he doesn't hide behind others, even when he's fighting above his weight. That's why when Sukuna mentions his egocentrism, he can't make Todo doubt his abilities. That's why Sukuna respects him. But that led to Yuta, and for the longest time, Sukuna never took Yuta seriously. He didn't even call him by his name, just the possessed brat. But that changed the moment Yuta crossed a line no one else would. By consuming Kenjaku's head, Riga allowed Yuta to copy his brain hopping technique, meaning Yuta could take Gojo's body, and even Sukuna was surprised. He actually apologizes, stating he didn't realize Yuta was capable of going that far. Everyone else was disgusted by Yuta's plan. They clung to humanity and didn't want to lose him, but that's when he finally snapped. Yuta calls out their hypocrisy. Everyone claims they're worried about Yuta losing himself, but no one ever had that conversation about Gojo. Not even Shoko, his childhood friend, she didn't give a rat's ass about Yuta's heinous idea, and that pissed him off. Gojo had been carrying the burden alone since childhood, turned it into a weapon and feared so that the world could live comfortably. That's when Yuta finally makes his choice. If Gojo had to become a monster for everyone else to survive, then someone had to replace him. He willingly abandons his humanity to protect the people he loves, and this would go against the morality of people like Angel, who care about God and his creed. So as Sukuna said to Jogo, to reach the pinnacle, you cannot worry about the future or identity. Even Uraume claimed modern sorcerers' idea of humanity was holding their power back as a sorcerer. That's why Yuta earned Sukuna's respect. But next up is our MC. Sukuna hated Yuji from the very beginning because he's the complete opposite. He's selfless, kind, and keeps choosing other people over himself. And yet, Yuji keeps getting stronger anyway. But what truly made Sukuna hate him wasn't just that. It was the fact that Sukuna lived inside Yuji's body. He knew Yuji's ideal was unbreakable and just as strong as his own. That made Yuji's existence feel like a personal attack on everything Sukuna believed in. That hatred only grew when Yuji started evolving at an insane pace, gaining even more power. 6 months earlier, this dude didn't even know curse energy existed. Now he has a domain expansion, reverse curse techniques, simple domain, constant black flashes, and freaking a technique that mirrors Sukuna's own. Any other sorcerer would have earned Sukuna's praise instantly, but because it was Yuji, Sukuna refused to acknowledge him. So what rage baited the king even more was that Yuji showed mercy upon him. Yuji chose not to keep attacking Sukuna just to satisfy revenge, thus proving his stance that all life has inherent value, even Sukuna, although he is evil incarnate. This meant Yuji won't feed back into the cycle of curses purely to relieve his own spite, but to actually coexist. And when the king finally died, something unbelievable happened. Sukuna's worldview was that weaklings who cling to life deserve the suffering they receive, right? Every challenger he ever faced either proved him right by abandoning their ideals or died trying to uphold them. But Yuji broke that belief. That's why Sukuna didn't curse Yuji upon death. He didn't die hatefully like Reggie, who cursed Megami upon losing. The same brat he mocked the entire story made Sukuna realize that clinging to hate was meaningless, and that's why Sukuna respects Yuji and would continue to do so in JJK Modulo. Not because Yuji is stronger than him by mastering all of his powers, but because Yuji proved you can reach the highest level of Jujutsu through the path of righteousness. Now in the sequel, Yuji finally fulfills what everyone wished for, ending the existence of curses altogether. By giving Yuki's research on the soul to Maru, he enables him to use his harmony technique alongside the energy stored within Rika's ring. When this is combined with Mahito's ideal transfiguration, Maru is able to alter the nature of humanity itself. As a result, curse energy no longer leaks from people, and with no negative energy to feed on, the creation of curses finally comes to an end. Now to enjoy more peak fiction regarding JJK, watch this video on your screen right now.